Welcome to part 2 of my interview with Arman Kaymakcian. Arman has an incredible story that he shared in the first part of this episode. So if you haven't listened, please take a listen to that part as well. During this section of our interview, he talks a lot about what the trauma has left him with after being abused as a child, becoming an addict, going through a really hard time as well with the law, and just having a difficult life experience when he was younger, to now being the proud husband and father of 3 children. An incredible story of redemption. And I will tell you, his book, He Called Me Redeemed, is a page turner. It's a real life account, a memoir of his life. And I encourage you to please purchase the book because it was an incredible read for myself. It is for anyone who's looking to overcome obstacles, or anyone who's dealing with addiction or their caretakers as well. I hope you will enjoy this episode. I am so grateful to Arman for sharing his incredible story with us here on the Today's the Day Changemakers podcast. If you've been an avid listener of Today's the Day Changemakers, I hope that you will share it. You will follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Today is the Day Live It. I also hope that you will subscribe, because the way it works with the algorithm, the more people subscribe, the more people get to listen. So thank you so much for 1,022 cities listening around the globe. So continuing to share Arman's incredible story, I am so happy to be able to ask you even more questions as we move forward into what I'm calling part 2 of this episode with you. Arman, I want to make sure I say your last name right again. Kaymakcian.
So good, Jodi. That's like the best pronunciation of my last name I've ever heard. Very good.
I'm so excited that I'm doing it right. I'm pretty good, but thank you. I'm so glad. So it's funny, when I was reading the book, you had talked about pronunciations of things, about how we all say them incorrectly, including myself, right? Like Iran, like Armenian instead of Armenian. So why do you think that is? I know it's a silly thing to ask, but when I read it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I do it. And I was like, I have to make sure not to do that during this podcast, because he mentions it in the book.
I just really kind of meant that to be a funny thing, a lighthearted, it's just culture. I mean, the English language, we have that hard I sound in our, pronunciation of words. So it comes natural that you would see Iran and make it Iran, but I always thought that was funny because, in my father's house, or listening to my grandfather and them speak about politics or things going on in the world, it was always pronounced a particular way. And it just was funny to me that the pronunciation of things. But yeah, that, not to denigrate anybody for the way they say anything or anything like that. It would be the same if figures of speech are actually a pretty interesting one, because like when I went to Armenia, I talk about that in the book as well, because I had this incredible opportunity to go to Armenia with my grandfather at 91. And it was just it was it was beyond an amazing trip. It was something more than that. It was like the place where we came from, the place where, my ancestry was from, going there with my grandfather at 91. My son was just about to be born. So it was like my grandfather, he's getting toward the end of his life, and my new son was coming, and there was all this stuff going on while I was going on this trip. And it's a really interesting story. If we had time, I might get into it, but I don't want to take too much of our time with it. There is a chapter outlined in the book about it. So, but I was over there, and I told a friend of mine there that I said, this something was driving me up a wall, and he said, he looked so confused. He said, "What, driving up the wall?" Like he was, because But figures of speech and way we pronounce things, yeah, it's funny, how different cultures are.
It really, really is. And now I want to thank you, because you know how like there's just tips and tools and resources that kind of like you remember things from. I'll always remember that from your book. So when I go to say those words now, I will work harder to say them correctly. So it's just funny how those things it'll remind me to do that. So, going back to your just incredible story and journey of making it out the other side through, sexual abuse, and we didn't share, and I don't know if you feel comfortable with it, who it was in the first part of this, who it was that did abuse you. Do you feel comfortable sharing that?
Yeah, so in when you're writing a memoir like this, a lot of names and things are changed just in order to just for legal reasons
Yeah,
and other
you
reasons
have
like
to.
that. So, in the book, it's outlined as my a good friend of my mother's, who was almost like an aunt to me, her boyfriend, who was very close to the family at that time.
Right, right. And so that has to be very difficult to write and have to go through. And when your family found out about this, how that had to be a really tough conversation.
Yeah, that's you would so I have to give my wife so much credit because she has just been such a blessing in my life, and
Mm.
she's just wonderful in so many ways. She's an incredible mother, an incredible wife, and she's just my best friend in the world. But she also is a very tough girl, and she's a no nonsense type of girl. I'm not I'm not, what am I trying to say? I have no worry about saying that because everybody who knows her knows that, and she knows it. So it's like, I'm not worried about making her upset by saying that, but she's definitely a tough girl. And one of the things that she really urged me on to do was like, you need to. I don't think I would have written this book without her, by the way, because I don't think that I would have had the courage to tell certain people in my life, let alone the entire world, that this took place. So once I told the people, then it was like, who else is there to worry about? And it's like, and so to answer your question, I thought it was going to be like this big thing. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to give them this information. It's just going to like, as a kid, a big reason why nobody was ever told was because I thought it would blow the entire family up. I thought this is like, it's going to destroy their marriage, and it's going to destroy just so many different things that I thought was going to take place. And if I would have known the lack of impact it was going to have on people to actually tell them this happened. Now, granted, this is many years later, and whatever, but there was a very there's kind of some surprising insignificance to sharing this experience. And it was kind of like, on one hand, it was like, wow, I'm surprised that it wasn't more of didn't have more of an effect on people. But also it was like, I worried about this for so long, for what? I kept this all
Mm.
in, and like killed myself inside to try to, like, help everybody else and not affecting them. And I affected myself in such a deep way. I mean, I was so near death. This thing almost killed me, to keep this inside. And it was like, poof, like I said it, nothing happened, nobody. It was like I could have just saved myself so much trouble by just being honest and open about it. Shed light on things, bring things to the light. There's the lesson in that.
I've heard stories of people who it's terrible when they tell and then people are like, no, that didn't happen or that
Oh
couldn't have
yeah.
happened.
Yep.
And I'm sure you've heard of that as well.
Definitely. That didn't happen with me. But there was, like I said, just a kind of a very, very, I don't know what you'd say. I'm trying to think of the word. It didn't affect them in the way that I thought it would. We'll just put it that way.
What would you tell somebody out there who does tell somebody and then they get invalidated by hearing that couldn't have happened? Do you have any advice for that person? Because that also could bring somebody to their knees after they share it and people don't believe them.
Yeah. Oh, that's a tough thing. I would say that, we can't live by other people's opinions of us, of their perception of us, et cetera, et cetera. Because if we did that, then you're just living your life on false pretenses, and you're living in a very inauthentic way. And I think a lot of us do this. Obviously, we all fall victim to this, where we want to put our best foot forward, and we want to be perceived a particular way, and we want to, bring a particular, um, representation of ourselves to the table. And I think that just really all has to go out the window, and you can't be worried about what other people are going to think and say and feel, because that's really crippling in life, to worry constantly. And we're living in a time where everything is so comparative with social media and everything else. You could wake up feeling pretty okay about yourself until you hop on Instagram and start seeing that people are, wow, this guy's changing the entire world. And I'm, you know, uh, this morning before we started this podcast, I wrote this book, and hopefully it'll inspire some people and whatever else. And I said something that may matter, or maybe it won't. But either way, I was changing diapers this morning and getting ready for the podcast and trying to get in the shower and rushing to get the kids in the car to get them out. This, we all have this, kind of chaotic existence where we're just trying to do the best with what we have, and make it work and whatever. And so, going back to your question, what would I say to the person that, they tell somebody this thing that's really heavy on their heart, and then they're not believed? If the only way I could think about it that would be comparative is, as an Armenian, we've gone 100 plus years as Armenians without Turkey recognizing their responsibility for the Armenian genocide. We go year after year after year without that recognition, and that is um, this massive, destructive, incredibly just horrific thing that took place to the Armenian people back in 1915, and it destroyed so much of you know Armenians, as far as who we were, and what we were doing at that time, what we owned. They just completely, destroyed an entire nation, temporarily, until Armenians were able to reestablish themselves, and do what they did. But that lack of recognition, it's tough. It's tough to have something that horrific happen generationally, and it affects generations even now. So many, far removed. I mean, we're talking 1915. It's 2025. The Armenian genocide commemoration will happen this month in New York and Manhattan. And again, we'll just go through the motions and go through the cycle of going and saying, "Hey, this happened, this took place," and it won't be recognized by many. But it's been recognized by a lot of nations, and been recognized by the United States at this point, and many others. But Turkey still, uh, does not take responsibility for it, and so I understand that that can be a really difficult thing to not have it be acknowledged, something like that. But you can't let that keep you in a negative state, I'd say.
Yeah, and like you said, and it's hard because you have to find the strength within yourself in order to not see that, and it's such a judgment, and to be invalidated, no matter if it's this or anything. Nobody likes to be invalidated. So it's finding your core, your the people around you. I know that I still haven't really shared my own story about living with an alcoholic and dealing with that. And I'm just starting to go through that journey, and finding Al-Anon and doing things that where you can find groups that will listen and believe in you and validate you, and they're out there. It's just, I just want the listeners to know they are out there. If it's not your family and your friends, there's someone else out there that will. So you just have to keep the search going.
Actually, that's an interesting thing to maybe talk about for a minute, because
Sure.
as a writer, you write this thing. I know for me, when I wrote the book, like I said before, I'm pretty super. I found myself, especially even now after writing the book, I'm pretty superstitious about telling people about projects that I'm working on before they're finished, because it's just better to get it done, and then you can now open your mouth and say, "Hey, I did this thing," But there is this thing where, I wrote the whole book, didn't tell anybody about it, and now I'm going to actually send it out to the editor, and I'm waiting for them to either to destroy it and say, this is, whatever, it's garbage. You got to go back to square one. And I tossed out 20,000 words in the beginning to start over. And that's when I started writing everything in scenes, like a movie inside my head. And that's when it really clicked and things started to work. But, I sent it out, and I'm waiting to get back. And, thank God I got an incredible glowing review from my editor, who's just this. They're I should plug them, by the way. They're called Enchanted Ink Publishing, And if you're looking to do anything with self-publishing or writing a book, etc., they're just wonderful. They were really great. So, go check them out, Enchanted Publishing. But when and she just got so much experience as a writer and editor. So like I didn't know what I was going to get back from her. But when she sent back this like glowing review, and she's like, I read a lot of things. And she's like, I really, as an editor, try not to invest myself in the story because I'm just trying to nuts and bolts, like, do what I have to do editing. But she's like, I could not help but get wrapped up in the story. And that's how I knew that there was power in just telling this story. But the point I was making was the validation part, because we talked about validation. And as a
Mm-hmm.
writer, as an artist in general, you want to be validated. There's this deep need, especially if you came from circumstances that were maybe you came from nothing, or you came from somewhere where a place of insignificance or whatever, and you want to do something that's going to actually matter, and you want people to validate that. You want people to come back and give you the great review and tell you this and tell you that, and we all crave that. We all want that. But I think that I've learned, especially, and I've listen, thank God there are, I think, almost 70 wonderful reviews on Amazon at this point. And I've gotten a lot of just incredible validation back from people in that way. And I'm really grateful for that, and all the support that I got from people around me. But you cannot live for other people's validation. Going back to my original point, you just can't, because it'll crush you as a writer, as an author, as a creative. If you're constantly doing things to get this validation, and you're seeking validation. And again, we're living in this age with social media. A lot of young people out there just constantly seeking validation. And I get it. It's tempting. You put things out there, and they have us in the system where I'm going to make a post, and then I'm going to look for how many people liked it. And if they don't like it, then it's invalidating. And if they do, that's so we're living in that kind of an economy. Eyeballs, how many eyeballs can I get on this thing? How many numbers? How much success is measured by numbers? There was a great quote by Rick Rubin, and that's a great book. If people are looking for a book on creativity, he wrote a book called The Creative Act, and it's just a really one of the most phenomenal books I've ever read on creativity. But he says your art is successful the minute you put it out into the world. That's the minute where you put it out and it's successful. And I think we could tie that to what we were speaking about before. The minute that you muster up the courage to go ahead and say that thing that you've been keeping inside for years and years and years, that's the minute at which you're validated. You know what I'm saying? Find the validation within yourself that you were able to have the courage to say this thing that a lot of people probably wouldn't have the courage to say. So, believe me or not, like the book or not, whatever it is, the art is successful when it goes out into the world. And I think that confession of what happened when you were young or whatever is successful the minute it comes out of your lips and gets out of your heart and your soul.
It is so true that we all do that, looking for that validation. And when I launched the podcast, immediately I'm like, okay, how many people are downloading it? How many people are
Oh yeah.
liking it? And I didn't want to launch it for years because I was so afraid who's going to listen, who's going to watch, who's going to like it, who's going to review it, all of that. And it holds us back, it paralyzes us. And if no matter what, if you're putting something out there and you're doing something in your heart, and if you are sharing something and somebody can't accept what you're sharing, it's on them. Hard to understand that in the moment when you're attached to the outcome, but it
Mhm.
is on them 100%. I'm so excited to share that this podcast has been downloaded in 93 countries and 1,022 cities around the globe. What an incredible honor it is to interview the changemakers, the inspirers, and those disrupting the status quo in the best way possible. And thank you to all of the listeners. We couldn't do it without you. I took one small step 4.5 years ago to make this podcast a reality. And from this podcast, the International Changemakers Forum was born, which will happen on October 23rd, 2025. And from that, several of us are getting together to write this incredible and publish this incredible book coming soon. And a new connective membership movement is coming as well. So Changemakers is more than this podcast, but this podcast was the beginning. So if there's something that you just know you want to accomplish in this life and you're not sure how you're going to get there, don't look at the how. Follow your why and take one small step towards it today. because today is the day and you cannot go back to yesterday. And you do not yet own tomorrow, as I say at the end of every single podcast. So make today the day you take the first step towards something you want to do in your life. And don't forget, please go to todayistheday.liveit.com for more information about all of the services provided through Today is the Day, including coaching, consulting, strategic alignment, unbelievable authentic connection within your organizations, within yourself, from business coaching and executive coaching to life coaching to consulting with large businesses. I just love helping businesses grow and people connect better. So I wanted to move into another direction here a little bit. So when I was 13 years old, I watched a movie called Not My Kid. And it was about a young girl whose dad was a doctor, and she stole his pad, his prescription pad, and she wound up getting addicted to drugs. And she wound up beating her sister because when she was high. And it was kind of based on a true story. And this was back actually probably in the 80s. I was 13. And so I listened to this, and because of that movie, I wrote to a million rehabs at 13 years old, and I never tried any drugs in my life because it hit me to that core. It became that core.
Wow.
So I was on the other extreme, totally didn't want any of that in my life, and it hit me that way. And the reason I bring this up is, first of all, I wish more kids did watch this movie, but if they need to up it and make it a newer movie, it's a great movie.
Oh, wow.
But
Interesting.
and it's called Not My Kid. So
Not My Kid.
Yep. And I want you to know, back then when the VCRs were out, I recorded it and said, when I have kids, I'm going to show it to them.
Yeah.
And I did. And believe it or not, when they were in 6th grade. And my question to you is, with your history and what you've been through with 3 boys that are going to hit teenage years, how are you going to share the message about drugs and alcohol? And what is your message to them as they grow up?
Gosh, I've already started it because obviously I have a lot of experience with this. That's the number one thing. And I've also met in this, journey of writing the book and going to talk and speak different places and meet different people. I've met a lot of parents that have lost their kids. And as a former drug dealer, it's not something I thought about back then. I didn't think about, I'm going to sell this couple bags of dope and maybe I'm going to kill, because you have your regular customers and whatever. You're not thinking that maybe that customer is selling those drugs to a 12-year-old kid. You don't know, and they came ultimately from your hand, and so you could be inadvertently part of that overdose. And now with fentanyl, it's a whole nother thing. But so to answer the question with my kids, there's only so much that I share with them about my particular story. I went recently. I had a great opportunity to go to my kids' school and do a kind of a speaking engagement there with the kids. And I told them my story in the way of just telling them I was really really sick, and I almost died. And and then that then I cried out to God and He saved me. So that was the way I kind of told it to them. I have to be careful what I tell them. Eventually, they're going to read this book. I dedicated the book to my 3 boys in the book, and my wife. So they'll eventually read the book, and they'll see what Dad's life was all about. And I'll be as real and authentic with them as I possibly can when they're at a significant age where they can understand what I went through. But as of now, I'm just trying to do what that film did to you when you were a kid. I'm trying to tell them and my wife kind of will get on me sometimes about this, because if I hear of an overdose, I show the kids, hey, this person took drugs and they died. Here's a 13-year-old kid that took a pill, he didn't understand what it was, and he died. It's not a matter of being a drug addict. It's a matter of you taking the wrong thing, of you being susceptible to. One of the things that I talk to my kids a lot about is being susceptible to influence by other people. Everybody's susceptible to influence by other people. My wife made a great point one day, because I'm telling the kids, I said, "Do you see Daddy doing things like that?" And she pointed out to me that sometimes if I'm around one group of people, I'll talk one way, right? Because I came up in the streets and stuff, so I'll talk one way, and then if you put me somewhere else, I'll tend to speak that way. And so there's a unavoidable inauthenticity there, and an influence by those people, or if even a particular person. I start talking like that person. If I like them, if I admire them, I start talking like them. So that's a chameleon thing that I think I do just for survival purposes. But either way, we're all susceptible to influence, but especially kids, and especially certain kids that seek that validation that we were talking about earlier. And they seek validation through partaking in these idiotic and stupid things that can't be reversed. Um, and so I try to warn them to be strong and to be solid, and not to be moved every different direction by every little thing. And I try to make a big point of doing that with them. Be your own person, like what you like. Don't be like everybody else. Don't fall into the crowd and just do what everybody else is doing. I know those things are all cliche, and we're all telling our kids all the same type of things, but I think there's a big teachable moment there with them. And just having them be their own person, even just in simple ways. The art that they like, the music that they like. you know People, oftentimes, there's so many stories of like the story, Melville wrote home her, Moby Dick was completely unsuccessful until like 100 years after he died. It went nowhere. And there's a lot of artists as well that now the collectible pieces of art that they created are sold for millions of dollars, but at the time they couldn't get anybody to look at their art, because we only like things when other people tell us it's okay to like them you know and it takes a real strong character and a visionary and somebody who's secure within themselves and their own identity to be able to look at a thing and appreciate it when nobody else does, and say, I liked it. I liked the ending of that movie, even though everybody said it was horrible, because I thought it was a great artistic decision by the producer and the director and whatever. Everybody else hated it, I like it, or whatever. So I think there's something to that, even in those moments, to tell the kids, you don't have to just like what everybody else likes. The other part is just like you said before, showing them these very real moments. And there's so many of them now that we can point them every time there's an overdose, take them to the newspaper or the computer, the whatever, to say, hey, look, another one just lost his life because they took drugs. And when you take drugs, you either die or go to jail. There's only two ways, unless there's some divine intervention or something that happens like what happened to me in my life. I should be dead or I should be in jail, but God had other plans, thank God. And so here I am. But drugs lead you either to death or to jail. So that's what I would tell the kids.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm a chameleon too. So I'm from Brooklyn. So I can absolutely talk Brooklynese with my friends, and all of a sudden the accent really does come out. And then of course in business I do the best I can to try to pull it back just a little bit, so not everybody has to know I'm from Brooklyn, but I
Right.
get it. I'm a chameleon. When you were talking, I'm like, he's a chameleon, and I'm like, because I know exactly what that's
Yeah.
like. Um Relationships, right? So after the abuse happened, and you have a wife and three beautiful children, and I love how you speak about them. But leading into that, how did the abuse affect your relationships and having, relationships with women and in general?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think that that's been a learning process. Number one, when I'm 10 years old and there's this abuse happening, the person at the time had a lot of knowledge when it came to computers and things like this. So, this is back when not a lot of people did. And I can remember being 10 years old and at his direction downloading image after image after image on the computer. And, you know, seeing those images, by the hundreds or whatever at that age, and now we're living in a time with iPhones and whatever. These kids are just susceptible to so many different. They're so much at their fingertips that shouldn't be available, but it is, and that really damaged me. It really affected me, and it really affected the way that um, I think that I looked at a lot of different things, and how I took the world in certain ways, and struggles with pornography and different things like that. And as a man, I think that that's something that, especially as a Christian man, I think that's something that we all need to master, and something that we all need to really get a hold of. And so, by God's grace, I have freedom in that area, and I feel um, an immense sense of gratitude for that, because I know how many men are completely wrapped up in it, and how damaging it is to not just our relationships with our spouses and with the people around us, but the feeling that we feel inside of shame and guilt, and you're not supposed to be doing this thing, and it's a real weakness, I think. And so men don't want to feel weak. We definitely don't want to be in a place of weakness and be operating in our life from a place of weakness, and I feel like that is one of those. So that's one thing that I really had to do a lot to overcome, because many years of you know, having that be something that was, you know, encumbrance. And I would say that. I would also say that one of the things that affects you when you're a dad, you and my wife has done a great deal to help me in this area, because there were times when the kids were really little that at first, like, giving them a bath or being around them when they were naked, or any of these kinds of things where, there's in other words, like there's I don't know how I'm trying to figure out a way to and explain it. I'm about as attracted to children as I would be to this coffee cup. In other words, you
Right.
understand what I'm trying to
Right.
say?
Yes,
And
I
and
do.
but because of what happened to you as a kid, you have a heightened sense of awareness when it comes to these things. And so my wife had to say, like, look, this is not, it's not who you are. There's nothing about you that you have anything to do with that. So you can just feel totally fine being a dad to our kids, and you don't have to worry about it, right? And
Mhm.
that was a real amazing, a really amazing thing that my wife did for me, was kind of in those moments getting me to be, hey, just be comfortable. It's your son, remember? Like, it's your son. You don't have to worry about it. It's not. And so that was because, and I've talked to other people that have gone through this, and they feel the exact same way. They're very aware of and again, it's not because of anything with them, it's because of what happened to them when they were kids, but they're very aware of, like, having a child on their lap, or playing with other people's kids. I don't want anybody to think anything, so, like, I might not get too close to other people's kids, or I might not. Now I've gotten so much better with that, where, like, a niece or a nephew or whatever, I'll pick them up and whatever, and hang out with them. But there was kind of a wall up, because I didn't want anybody to think anything. So that was a really negative consequence that I think that's probably the thing that I wouldn't say angers me, but something that frustrates me most about what happened to me as a kid is having to deal with that area, and as far as relationships with women and things, I think the first real relationship I've had with a woman is my wife. Meaning, before that, I was just a dead, like I said, I was like a walking corpse. And so, there was so much in my life that was problematic.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I felt that, like, that has to be so hard. And your wife sounds like an incredible person. She validates you and shares that with you. So, kudos to her and giving you that, and you being open to that. Um, Therapy. Have you been doing ongoing? Did you go to therapy for time after you came out of rehab? And do you go to therapy now, if you don't mind me asking?
No, so the my therapy is the people that are surrounding me. And just a heads up, Jody, I'm gonna have to wrap up on this
You
question.
got it.
But
Yes.
I'd love to talk to you all day if I could,
I know.
believe me. But
I know.
so yeah, therapy. My therapy is just the community of people that are around me, my church, our all the great friends and people around us, and my pastor, and my family, etc. These are my therapy. Men's Bible studies that I go to, and all these types of things, that this sense of community that's around me. Those are the people that I feel comfortable sitting with, talking with, and gaining insight from and advice from, and so that's my therapy. And it's been that way since the very beginning. I've never and by the way, I'm not taking this away from people. Go, if you need to go to a therapist, go to a therapist. I feel like there's a completely different worldview that I have as a Christian, and so it makes sense for me to get my counseling from somebody who I feel is going to give me the kind of guidance that I need to go the right direction.
Thank you so much for sharing and coming back on and doing this quick part two with me. I really do appreciate you and this very much, and love to have you back on as your journey continues. And we'll share as now that you're part of the Changemaker family. Thank you for doing that. Anything else you want to say?
No, I think I'm good. I really appreciate being on today. Just grateful again to have the opportunity. Grateful for you, Jody, and looking forward to future conversations. And thank you again.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And I'm going to say what I say at the end of every single podcast. Today is the day. You cannot go back to yesterday, and you do not yet own tomorrow. So, what steps, small or large, are you taking today to get yourself closer to your goal? Thank you, Arman, for sharing your incredible story. And please, everybody, buy his book. Give it one more time, the title and where they can get the book.
Sure. The title is He Calls Me Redeemed. And it's available everywhere books are sold. You could just type in the title to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or whatever you like, or click the description that's in the bottom underneath this video here.
Sounds great. Thanks again. Have a great week, everyone.
God bless you guys. Thank you.